Central Auto Racing Boosters Hall of Fame inductee, Bob Thoman, has spent the last 4.5 decades racing in tracks across the country. He explains how his racing career began.
I loved the competition. My dad took us to State Fair. I got the bug. I had a couple buddies in Higginsville that owned a car. They thought one of them was going to drive it, and neither one of them would. They didn't even want to get in it, and so they asked me to come and drive it, and I jumped at the chance.
He describes how it felt to win his first race.
It's hard to describe because it's something that you strive for so hard, and you take a lot of chances for. And I remember the first feature I won, I'll never forget that. It was down in California, Missouri, on a little track down there. I'd never been there before. I'd raced for a few years and struggled, and it was unreal. It's a high that you can't describe hardly.
Thoman shares his favorite memories throughout his career.
There was a track in Marshall, Missouri, Saline County Speedway. I loved that place. The crowds that were there all the time, when that place was in its prime, even during the state fair, when everybody around here was at the state fair back in those days, they would pack the grandstands every Sunday night. I mean, you were racing against a full house every time you went in there, and nobody knew who was going to win till it was over.
Late in his racing career, Thoman was diagnosed with cancer.
You know, I'd been racing a lot of years up to then, and got the cancer, and I wasn't a guy that had ever even been to a doctor. I didn't have a family doctor when I got cancer. And I knew racing might be over. I knew my life might be over because it was colon cancer, and I had to go in for surgery, and I'd never been operated on before. And so, yeah, it's kind of an emotional time, and went in, lived through the surgery, and started taking chemotherapy, and that was a rough summer where, you know, anybody that's ever had chemo knows you never feel good. Wound up whipping it, and not long after I thought I was over that, I came down with prostate cancer. And so I thought, well, I've had a long enough career, I'm done. My motor was still down at my friend's house at Farmington. He maintains my motors. And so Greg Houston was his name, we called him Honky. He had cancer that was terminal. He knew he wasn't going to live very long. So he said, Bob, I'd like to see you race that car one more time. Danny and I went and got the motor, put it in there, and we were ready to go racing the next weekend, and he died on that Friday. So we went through the funeral. A week or so later, we decided we were going to race in Green Valley, Missouri, in his memory. I told the racetrack I hadn't raced for 4 years because of my cancer. I said, well, I'm going to come back and race in my buddy's memory. When I signed in at the pit gate, they said, okay, so what's your plan? Are you going to just take it out on the track and run a couple laps and pull it in his memory? And I said, no, I'm planning on racing this thing. Wound up almost winning the race. I ran second, and and that was an emotional, big deal. The kid that beat me was 17 years old, and I was 71, and they had me pull up on the front stretch with him. There were a lot of people sitting there at that race that, just because I'd been out for a long time, was recovering from cancer when, that got me started back racing again. I raced couple of 3 years after that.
In 2016, Thoman was inducted into the Central Auto Racing Boosters Hall of Fame. He describes how it felt to be chosen.
Well, it was a great honor. I was told about it before I was supposed to be told about it by a friend of mine who was a racer, and he was on the board. He came and told me, he said, Bob, you're going to get a call, and they'll come down and interview you. They'll want you to get some things together. He let me know it was going to happen, but it was still a shock and a great honor when it did happen. And you know, the night of the banquet, there were 3 or 4 of us. 2 other racers that were put in were my heroes when I was a fan of racing. So it was an honor to go in with those guys. To be respected like that's his honor.
I'm Caitlin Mulcahy reporting for Nickel Student News.